Homeless black poor boy says he can wake billionaire's daughter. What happened next shocked everyone. Hello guys, I spent a lot of time creating this nice, scripted billionaire story. Appreciate my effort by subscribing to this channel. Room 714 at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center smells like failure wrapped in antiseptic. The machine surrounding Lilith Brooks' bed cost more than most people earn in a lifetime, yet they cannot answer the only question that matters. Why won't she wake up? Richard Brooks sits in a leather chair that cost $8,000, installed by the hospital specifically for him. His hands, which signed billion-dollar contracts without trembling, shake as they reach for his daughter's small fingers. Cold. Always cold now. 17 days cold. Outside this room, Richard Brooks is a god. He taught artificial intelligence to predict human behavior. His algorithms run the world's largest social networks, determining what billions of people see, think, and buy. Forbes called him the man who decoded humanity. Time magazine put him on their cover with the headline, "The future thinks like Richard Brooks." But inside room 714, he is nobody. Less than nobody. He is a father watching his 8-year-old daughter exist in the space between life and death, and all his genius means nothing. The machines breathe for her. In and out, a rhythm so steady it becomes torture. Her chest rises and falls with mechanical precision, as if she's a beautiful doll someone forgot to switch on. The heart monitor draws its endless green mountains across the black screen. Beep, beep, beep. Each sound a reminder that she's alive but absent. Dr. Patricia Hernandez stopped making promises 11 days ago. The specialist from Johns Hopkins left with sympathetic nods and carefully worded emails. The experimental treatment from Switzerland failed. The revolutionary stem cell procedure from Tokyo failed. Everything fails. Everything. Mr. Brooks' visiting hours ended 2 hours ago. The night nurse speaks with practiced gentleness, the kind reserved for the grieving and the stubborn. Richard doesn't move. He's memorized every freckle on Lilith's face, every curl of her golden hair against the pillow. She looks peaceful, like she's dreaming of something beautiful. But he knows better. The brain scans show activity, yet she remains unreachable. Dr. Hernandez called it severe neurological disconnection syndrome, a diagnosis that means they don't actually know what's wrong. The nurse touches his shoulder. "Sir, I really need to." 5 more minutes. His voice sounds like gravel. When did he last sleep? Tuesday? Wednesday? That's when he sees the boy. A small figure stands in the doorway, barefoot despite the November cold. He wears a jacket 3 sizes too big, threadbare and stained. His dark skin catches the hallway light, and his eyes, impossibly large, impossibly bright, lock onto Richard with an intensity that makes the billionaire flinch. Security should have stopped him. This is the private wing. You need 3 different clearances to reach this floor. The boy walks forward, tracking dirty footprints on the pristine tile. He stops at the foot of Lilith's bed and studies her with the focus of a chess master analyzing a complex position. "Sir, I'm calling security." The nurse reaches for her phone. The boy speaks 5 words that stop time. "I can wake her up." The night Lilith Brooks' collapse began with applause. Lincoln Center's David H. Koch Theater glittered with Manhattan's elite. Women draped in diamonds. Men in tailored suits that cost more than cars. They'd come to watch the annual Youth Ballet Showcase, an event where wealthy parents paid $50,000 per child for the privilege of watching their offspring dance across one of the world's most famous stages. Richard Brooks arrived late. His Tesla pulled up to the curb at 7:47 p.m., 13 minutes after the performance began. He'd been on a conference call with Singapore. Something about a data breach, a lawsuit, stock prices. The details blurred together now. Inside, he flashed his VIP pass and slipped into his reserved seat. Front row, center. The most expensive seat in the house, and he'd missed watching his daughter take the stage. On stage, 12 young dancers moved through a piece called Garden of Dreams. Lilith was the second from the left, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, her blue dress catching the stage lights like water. She'd been excited about this dress. Something about her mother choosing the fabric before she died. Richard couldn't remember the exact story. There were so many stories he only half listened to. His phone buzzed. He glanced down. An email from his CFO. The merger negotiations were entering a critical phase. If they moved quickly, Brooks Technologies could acquire Neuralmind for $3.2 billion. It would be the deal of the year. He began typing a response. On stage, the music shifted. The other dancers moved into the wings, leaving Lilith alone in a spotlight. This was her solo, the moment she practiced for 6 months. She began the piece her mother had choreographed 2 years ago, before the accident. Mama's Dance, Lilith called it. Richard looked up. His daughter moved with a grace that startled him. When had she become so grown? She seemed to float across the stage, her arms extending like wings, her movements telling a story he didn't understand but could feel. Then she stopped. Mid-movement, mid-breath, she simply stopped. Her arms fell to her sides. Her eyes fixed on something in the audience, or perhaps on nothing at all. The music continued, filling the theater with melody that now felt ominous. Richard stood. Other audience members leaned forward, uncertain if this was part of the performance. Lilith's lips moved, forming words no one could hear. Her eyes were open, but she looked through the audience as if staring into another dimension entirely. Then she collapsed. Not dramatically, not with a cry or a stumble. She simply folded, her legs giving way, her body crumpling like paper. The sound of her small frame hitting the stage echoed through the theater's perfect acoustics. Richard ran. He vaulted over the orchestra pit barrier, something he didn't know he was capable of, and reached her in seconds. Other parents and staff converged on the stage. Lilith, baby, can you hear me? He cradled her head. Her eyes were open but unseeing. Her chest rose and fell, but she was somewhere else. Someone called 911. The theater descended into chaos. Richard held his daughter and felt the universe tilt. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not to him. Not to her. He'd lost Elena already. He'd survived that. Barely. But he'd survived by throwing himself into work, by building walls around the grief, by ensuring nothing could hurt him again. Now those walls meant nothing. The paramedics arrived within minutes. They asked questions Richard couldn't answer. Had she eaten? Any medications? Previous medical conditions? He didn't know. He'd been on a call with Singapore. He'd missed breakfast with her. Again. When was the last time they'd had a real conversation? The ambulance ride to Cedars-Sinai blurred into a nightmare of sirens and fluorescent lights. Lilith lay on the stretcher, breathing but absent. Richard held her hand and made promises to a God he didn't believe in. In the emergency room, Dr. Patricia Hernandez took over. Neurological tests, brain scans, blood work. Everything came back normal. Impossibly, frighteningly normal. Mr. Brooks, your daughter's brain is functioning, but she's not responding to any stimuli. It's as if she's chosen not to wake up. Chosen. Richard's voice cracked. She's 8 years old. Children don't choose comas. Dr. Hernandez's expression revealed nothing. We'll continue monitoring. Sometimes these cases resolve on their own. But 17 days later, Lilith was still gone. By day 5, Cedars-Sinai had transformed room 714 into something resembling a spaceship. Monitors covered 3 walls, displaying brain waves, heart rhythms, oxygen levels, and a dozen other metrics Richard had learned to obsess over. Each number became a prayer. Each stable reading a small mercy. Each unchanged value a tiny death. Dr. Hernandez ran tests with names like incantations, electroencephalography, functional MRI, positron emission tomography. She spoke in careful, measured tones about neural pathways and synaptic responses, about the brain's mysterious ability to protect itself by shutting down. The scans show normal activity, she explained on day 7, pointing to colorful images that might have been beautiful in any other context. Her brain is processing information. She's not brain dead, Mr. Brooks. She's just not here. Richard hired the best. Dr. James Chun from Johns Hopkins, who'd published groundbreaking research on consciousness. Dr. Yuki Tanaka from Tokyo, who developed experimental procedures using stem cells to repair neural damage. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo from London, whose work on coma patients had won international acclaim. They arrived with their teams, their equipment, their theories. Each brought hope wrapped in technical language. Each eventually left with apologies. Dr. Chun tried a new protocol involving targeted electrical stimulation. We'll essentially reboot her neural networks, he explained. It failed. Dr. Tanaka proposed introducing modified stem cells that could repair any microscopic damage the scans might have missed. Richard signed the consent forms without reading them. That failed too. Dr. Okonkwo suggested the problem might be psychological rather than physical. Sometimes, Mr. Brooks, the mind protects us by retreating. Has Lilith experienced any trauma? The question landed like a fist. Yes, trauma. Her mother's death. The car accident Lilith had witnessed. Elena's funeral, where 8-year-old Lilith had stood silent and dry-eyed while Richard sobbed for the first and last time since becoming an adult. But that was 2 years ago. Lilith had seemed fine. Quiet, perhaps. More withdrawn than before. But children were resilient, everyone said. Children bounce back. We've managed that, Richard lied. She's had therapy, 3 sessions. Lilith had attended 3 therapy sessions before Richard decided she was handling things well enough. He'd been too busy. The company was expanding. There were always meetings, always deals, always another crisis requiring his attention. By day 12, the specialists had run out of ideas. They stood in the hallway outside room 714. This collection of the world's greatest minds, and admitted defeat with sympathetic expressions and carefully worded suggestions about preparing for all possibilities. Richard spent his nights in that $8,000 chair, his days pacing the hospital corridors or standing at the window overlooking East 70th Street. Below, New York City continued its relentless rhythm. People rushed to work. Taxis honked. Life happened. How dare it? How dare the world keep spinning when his daughter was trapped in silence? His company's stock price dropped 15%. The board called emergency meetings. His CFO sent increasingly urgent emails. The Neural-Mind merger was falling apart. Competitors were circling. Everything Richard had built teetered on the edge of collapse. He didn't care. Let burn. Let all burn. On day 15, Dr. Hernandez sat him down in her office. The conversation he'd been dreading. Mr. Brooks, we need to discuss long-term care options. If Lilith doesn't wake in the next few weeks, we should consider transferring her to a facility that specializes in. No, I understand this is difficult, but she's not going anywhere. We're not giving up. Dr. Hernandez's expression softened with something worse than pity. Understanding. She'd had this conversation before. She knew how it ended. I'm not suggesting we give up. I'm suggesting we acknowledge reality. Your daughter may never wake up, Mr. Brooks. And if she does, she may not be the same girl you remember. That night, Richard sat beside Lilith's bed and truly looked at her for the first time in 17 days. Really looked. Her face had thinned. Her skin had lost its glow. The machines were keeping her alive, but she was fading anyway. He tried to remember the last thing he'd said to her before she collapsed. Before the performance. He'd been rushing out the door that morning, late for a meeting. She'd asked him something. What was it? Something about the dress? About her dance? He'd kissed her forehead, a reflex, not a moment, and said, what had he said? He couldn't remember. The machines beeped their steady rhythm. In and out, each breath a mechanical lie. Richard put his head in his hands and felt something break inside his chest. Not his heart, something deeper. The foundation he'd built his life upon. The certainty that intelligence and wealth could solve any problem. His daughter was dying by degrees, and all his power meant nothing. 43 blocks north, in a condemned building in Hunts Point, Kyle Porter woke from a dream about gardens and locked doors. The morning light filtering through broken windows painted gold stripes across the sleeping bodies of the other families who shared this space. 14 people lived in what had once been a commercial warehouse. No heat, no running water, but it was shelter, and in November, shelter meant survival. Kyle sat up carefully, trying not to wake his mother. She'd worked a double shift at the laundromat and wouldn't wake for another hour. Her face, even in sleep, looked exhausted. She was 32 but looked 50. Poverty aged people like nothing else. He pulled on his jacket, the one Mama Esther had given him before she died, and slipped outside. The Bronx morning hit him with cold air and car exhaust. Around him, Hunts Point was waking up. Delivery trucks rumbled past. Store owners rolled up metal gates. The neighborhood carried its poverty with a kind of defiant dignity that Kyle loved. He walked to the corner where Mama Esther used to set up her folding chair. She called it her office, this patch of sidewalk where she'd sit from dawn to dusk, watching the neighborhood, offering advice, sometimes healing people in ways that made no sense to doctors but worked anyway. Kyle missed her with an ache that never faded. 3 months gone, but he still expected to see her there. Her dark skin creased with wrinkles, her eyes sharp and knowing, her hands that had held him through every nightmare. She'd taught him things, secret things, how to listen to what people weren't saying, how to see the sickness that lived in hearts, not bodies, how to understand that healing wasn't about medicine, it was about truth. The body keeps score, she told him repeatedly. Every lie we tell ourselves, every pain we swallow, every truth we hide, the body remembers. And sometimes, baby, the body decides it's had enough. It stops participating in the lie. Kyle hadn't fully understood then. He was starting now. He'd inherited her gift, though he didn't want it. The knowing, the seeing. When he looked at people, he didn't just see their faces. He saw the weight they carried, the guilt they harbored, the love they'd buried. It was exhausting, like being forced to read everyone's diary without permission. At the corner bodega, he bought a coffee with quarters he'd collected recycling cans. The owner, Mr. Rodriguez, nodded at him. "You eating, kid?" "Yeah, Mr. Rodriguez." "I'm good. Your mama know you're out this early?" "She knows." It was a lie, but a kind one. Mr. Rodriguez had enough problems without worrying about one more homeless kid. Kyle walked to the pocket park, really just a patch of concrete with 3 scraggly trees and 2 benches. This is where the neighborhood gathered to share news, gossip, and survival strategies. Sister Maria was already there, setting up for her morning distribution of sandwiches and coffee for anyone who needed them. Sister Maria wasn't actually a nun, but everyone called her that because of how she moved through the neighborhood like an angel in sneakers. She volunteered at 3 soup kitchens, ran a clothing drive, and somehow knew everyone's name. "Kyle, baby, come get breakfast." He accepted a sandwich wrapped in foil, peanut butter and jelly. The same thing every day, but it was food, and food was grace. "How's your mama?" Sister Maria asked. "Tired. Working a lot." Hum. "And you? You doing okay? I know losing Mama Esther hit you hard." Kyle nodded, not trusting his voice. Sister Maria had this way of asking questions that made truth spill out before you could stop it. She studied him with eyes that saw too much. "You've got her gift, don't you?" The knowing. Kyle stared at his sandwich. "I don't want it. Gifts aren't about wanting, baby. They're about using. Mama Esther used hers to help people. You will too." "How?" "I'm 11. I'm homeless. Nobody listens to kids like me." Sister Maria smiled. "Yet, nobody listens yet. But they will. When the time comes, they will." She pulled out her phone, an old model with a cracked screen, and scrolled through news articles. "You hear about that rich man's daughter? The one in the coma at Cedars-Sinai?" Kyle shook his head. "Sad story. 8 years old. Collapsed during a ballet performance. Been unconscious for over 2 weeks. Doctors can't figure it out." Sister Maria's expression turned thoughtful. "I volunteer at Cedars-Sinai twice a month. The nurses are saying strange things about this case. Saying the girl isn't sick. Saying she's refusing to wake up. Like she's choosing to stay asleep." Something cold touched the back of Kyle's neck. The same feeling he'd get when Mama Esther was about to teach him something important. Why would a kid choose to stay asleep, he asked. Why indeed? Sister Maria looked at him meaningfully. Maybe she's waiting for something. Or someone. Maybe she's waiting for the world to change enough that coming back makes sense. The dream from last night rushed back. The blonde girl in the garden, standing by a door, holding a key but refusing to use it. In the dream, Kyle had understood what she needed, though he couldn't remember now. "I gotta go," he said abruptly, standing. "Kyle!" But he was already walking away, the sandwich forgotten in his hand. His heart pounded with certainty he couldn't explain. He knew things sometimes, just knew them. It was Mama Esther's gift, passed down like an inheritance made of light and burden. He knew the girl in the hospital wasn't sick. He knew what she was waiting for. And somehow, impossibly, he knew he could help her. That night, Kyle dreamed of Elena Brooks, though he didn't know her name yet. She stood in a garden filled with flowers that shouldn't exist, blue roses, silver sunflowers, trees that grew books instead of fruit. She wore a white dress and held a photograph of a little blonde girl. "She's waiting," Elena said, her voice like whined through leaves. "But she won't come back until he remembers how to be real." "Who?" Kyle asked in the dream. "The man who forgot how to cry. The man who traded his heart for equations. My husband." Elena's face was sad, but not angry. "He's drowning in guilt, and it's pulling our daughter down with him." "I don't understand." "You will. You've always understood. It's why Mama Esther gave your gift." Elena knelt down at Kyle's eye level, though in dreams they were somehow the same height. "My daughter saw me die. She watched her mother bleed out in a car wreck while her father was on a phone call too important to interrupt. She's been carrying that weight for 2 years. And now she's tired, Kyle. So tired of being strong while her daddy hides behind his computers and his money. What do I do? What your grandmother did. Speak the truth. Make people see what they're refusing to look at." Elena began to fade, the garden dissolving around her. "Hurry, Kyle. She's getting comfortable in the dark. Soon she won't want to come back at all." Kyle woke, gasping. The warehouse was dark except for the city light bleeding through broken windows. His mother snored softly 3 feet away. Everything was normal, except nothing would be normal again. He spent the next day asking questions. This was the Bronx's gift, the Whisper Network, where information flowed through neighborhoods like water finding cracks. Everyone knew someone who knew someone. At the laundromat where his mother worked, he asked the other women about Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. "That's the fancy hospital," Mrs. Chun said, folding towels with practiced efficiency. "Where rich people go to get sick in style." "Why you asking?" "Just curious." Curious. She gave him a look that said she didn't believe him, but wouldn't push. "My cousin works there. Cafeteria staff. Says the place is crawling with security. Can't get past the lobby without ID." At the soup kitchen, Kyle helped Sister Maria serve lunch and asked more questions. "You're awfully interested in this Brooks case," Sister Maria observed, ladling soup into bowls. "What's going on in that head of yours?" "I think I can help her." Sister Maria stopped ladling. Around them, the soup kitchen hummed with conversation and the clatter of trays. She studied Kyle with an intensity that made him want to look away. "You've seen something, haven't you?" A knowing. Kyle nodded. "Baby, listen to me very carefully. That hospital is in Manhattan. That world, it's not ours. And that little girl's father, Richard Brooks? He's one of the richest, most powerful men in America. People like us don't just walk into their lives." Mama Esther said healing doesn't care about money. Mama Esther was right. But Mama Esther also knew how to navigate systems. She knew when to push and when to wait. "You're 11, Kyle. You're brilliant and gifted, but you're also a black boy in a hoodie. You understand what that means." He did. The talks his mother gave him. How to behave around police. How to make himself small and non-threatening. How to survive in a world that saw him as dangerous before they saw him as human. "But what if I'm supposed to help? Well, that's why I have this gift." Sister Maria's expression softened. She pulled out her phone and typed quickly, then showed him the screen. "This nurse, Janet Williams, works in the ICU at Cedars-Sinai. She's my friend from church. If anyone can get you in that building, it's her. But Kyle, you need to be sure. Once you walk through those doors, you can't just be a kid anymore. You'll be carrying something bigger than yourself." "I know." That was Sunday. Kyle spent Monday preparing. He didn't know how to prepare for something like this, so he did what Mama Esther used to do. He sat quietly and listened to the knowing inside him. The knowing said, "Tuesday evening, before sunset, wear your grandmother's jacket. Bring nothing else." Tuesday afternoon, Kyle's mother caught him at the door. "Where you going, baby?" "Just out." She grabbed his arm gently. "Kyle, I know that look. That's Mama Esther's look. The one she'd get before she'd disappear for hours and come back having changed someone's life. What are you about to do? He couldn't lie to her. Something Mama Esther would want me to do. His mother's eyes filled with tears she wouldn't let fall. She cried too much at her life already. You're so much like her. It scares me. The world isn't kind to people like you. People who see too much and care too much. I have to go, Mama. She pulled him into a fierce hug. Then go. But come back, you hear me? Whatever you're about to do, you come back home. Kyle took the 6 train to Manhattan. The subway was its own universe. People crammed together. Everyone carefully not seeing each other. He stood near the door, his grandmother's jacket warm around him despite its threadbare fabric. At 68th Street, he got off and walked 3 blocks to Cedars-Sinai. The building rose like a glass and steel mountain, all clean lines and gleaming surfaces. Security cameras dotted every corner. This was a fortress of medicine and money. Kyle walked around to the ground floor windows until he found room 714. Through the glass, he saw her. The blonde girl from his dreams, small and still in a bed surrounded by machines. And beside her, a man with gray at his temples and eyes that had forgotten how to see anything but failure. Richard Brooks looked up. Their eyes met through the window. Kyle knew, in that instant, that everything Mama Esther had taught him had led to this moment. He walked to the entrance, ignored the security guard's questioning look, and headed straight for room 714. The universe had arranged this meeting. Now he just had to speak the truth. The boy shouldn't have been able to reach room 714. Cedars-Sinai security was designed to keep exactly this kind of chaos out. Unscheduled visitors, unauthorized personnel, anyone who might disturb the wealthy patients paying premium rates for privacy and peace. Yet there he stood. Richard blinked. Certain exhaustion was creating hallucinations. But no, the boy was real. Small, maybe 11 years old, wearing a jacket that swallowed his thin frame. His jeans were torn at the knees. His sneakers were held together with duct tape. And his feet, Jesus, his feet were bare. In November, in Manhattan, the night nurse, Gina, noticed him a second later. Excuse me, you can't be in here. How did you? She reached for her call button, ready to summon security. The boy ignored her. He walked to the foot of Lilith's bed with the confidence of someone who'd been invited. His eyes moved across the monitors, reading the displays with an understanding that seemed impossible for a child his age. Sir, I'm calling security. Gina's finger hovered over the button. Richard raised his hand. Wait. Mr. Brooks, we have protocols. I said wait. Something in his voice made Gina pause. Richard couldn't explain it, but he needed to hear what this boy had come to say. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the simple fact that after 17 days of expert opinions that accomplished nothing, a barefoot boy in a torn jacket couldn't possibly make things worse. The boy studied Lilith with an intensity that made Richard uncomfortable. It wasn't the clinical assessment doctors performed. It was something else. Personal. As if he knew her. What's her name? Richard asked. Kyle Porter. What did you get in here, Kyle? I walked. That's not what I meant. This floor has security. I know. Kyle's eyes met Richard's, and Richard felt something shift in the air. Those eyes were too old for an 11-year-old face. They'd seen things. Understood things. I came because your daughter is waiting. Waiting for what? The doctors say. The doctors are wrong. Kyle said it with such certainty that Richard almost believed him. She's not sick, Mr. Brooks. Her body works fine. Her brain works fine. She's just not here. That doesn't make any sense. It makes perfect sense. She's hiding, and she won't come back until you stop hiding too. The words hit Richard like a physical blow. Gina made a disgusted sound. Okay, that's enough. This is inappropriate. I'm calling. I can wake her up. 5 words. Spoken quietly, but they filled the room like a shout. Gina laughed incredulously. You gotta be kidding me. Mr. Brooks, this child is clearly disturbed. We need to... Ow! Richard's voice cracked. He hated how desperate he sounded, but he was past pride now. Past dignity. How can you wake her when the best doctors in the world have failed? Kyle looked back at Lilith. Because I know what she needs. And it's not medicine. This is ridiculous, Gina muttered, reaching for her phone. Don't. Richard stood, positioning himself between Gina and the door. Give him 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes. Mr. Brooks, if administration finds out I allowed an unauthorized minor into a patient's room, I'll take full responsibility. 2 minutes. Gina looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. But what did sanity matter when your daughter was dying by degrees? She stepped into the hallway, muttering about lawsuits and licenses, but she left them alone. Richard turned back to Kyle. You have 2 minutes. Tell me what you think you know. Kyle moved closer to the bed. He didn't touch Lilith, but his hand hovered near her forehead as if feeling for something invisible. When he spoke, his voice was soft but certain. 2 years ago, your wife died in a car accident. Your daughter was in the car. She watched her mother bleed out while they waited for the ambulance. And you weren't there because you were on a business call. The room tilted. Richard grabbed the chair for support. How do you know that? I know lots of things I shouldn't know. My grandmother called it the knowing. She taught me how to listen to what people carry. Kyle's eyes found Richard's. Your daughter's been carrying that night for 2 years. Watching you bury yourself in work instead of grieving. Watching you hide from the truth. She's been strong for you, Mr. Brooks. So strong. But at that ballet recital, when she was dancing the piece her mother made for her, something broke. She realized she couldn't keep being strong. She was too tired. You're saying she chose this? That she deliberately, not consciously, but yeah, part of her decided it was easier to sleep than to keep watching you disappear. Kyle's voice was gentle but unrelenting. She's waiting, Mr. Brooks. Waiting for you to be real again. Waiting for you to stop hiding behind your computers and your money and your guilt. Richard's legs gave out. He collapsed into the chair. I don't know how to do that. I know. That's why I'm here. To help you figure it out. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Multiple sets. Security, probably. Gina must have called them anyway. Mr. Brooks. Kyle's urgency sharpened. You have to decide right now. Do you want to save your daughter? Or do you want to protect yourself from the truth? Because you can't do both. 3 security guards appeared in the doorway. Large men in crisp uniforms, looking distinctly uncomfortable about manhandling a child but prepared to do their jobs. Sir, we need you to come with us, one said to Kyle. Richard stood. His voice, when it came, carried the authority of a man who'd built empires. No, he stays. Mr. Brooks, we have protocols. He stays. That's not a request. The guards looked at each other. Richard Brooks was not just any patient's family member. He'd donated $40 million to this hospital. His name was on the children's wing. The board of directors took his calls. Sir, if you could just explain. I don't owe you an explanation. This boy is my guest. He's helping my daughter. And if you try to remove him, I'll withdraw every penny I've donated to this institution and make sure everyone knows why. The threat hung in the air. The guards retreated, but their expressions promised this wasn't over. Kyle looked at Richard with something like respect. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I still don't know if I believe you. Richard sank back into his chair. But I'm willing to listen. What do you need me to do? First, I need to understand what you've been refusing to feel. Then I need you to say it out loud. All of it. Every truth you've buried. Kyle pulled up the room's second chair and sat down, suddenly looking very small and very young. This is going to hurt, Mr. Brooks. Healing always does. In the hospital bed, surrounded by machines that breathed and beeped and measured, but couldn't heal, Lilith Brooks remained silent. But for the first time in 17 days, the heart monitor's rhythm changed. Just slightly. Just enough to notice. She was listening. Kyle sat beside Lilith's bed for 3 hours that first night, asking Richard Brooks questions that felt like surgery without anesthesia. Tell me about the accident, Kyle began. I've already told the police, the insurance company, I don't care what you told them. Tell me what you tell yourself at 3 in the morning when you can't sleep. Richard's jaw tightened. Who did this child think he was? But something about Kyle's steady gaze made evasion impossible. The knowing. That's what he called it. Looking at Kyle was like looking into a mirror that showed only truth. It was raining. Richard heard himself say. Elena was driving Lilith home from Playdate. I was supposed to pick them up, but I had a meeting that ran late. So Elena drove. What were you meeting about? The neural mind acquisition. We were negotiating terms. What were you really meeting about? Kyle's voice was patient but insistent. What was so important that you sent your wife out in the rain? The question pierced something. Richard's hands began to shake. I was trying to prove something. To myself. To the board. I just turned 37, and people were saying I was losing my edge. That younger tech entrepreneurs were surpassing me. So I was chasing this deal that would make me relevant again. Important. Necessary. And your wife called you. It wasn't a question. Kyle knew. Somehow impossibly he knew. 3 times, Richard whispered. She called 3 times. I was in the conference room with 7 other executives. The deal was falling apart. I saw her name on my phone, and I sent her to voicemail. All 3 times. The admission hung in the air like poison. Richard had never said it out loud before. Not to the police, who'd ruled it an accident. Not to the therapist he'd seen twice before deciding therapy was unproductive. Not even to himself in the darkness of sleepless nights. What happened next? Kyle's voice was soft. 20 minutes later, a police officer knocked on the conference room door. There'd been an accident on the FDR Drive. A truck had hydroplaned, crossed lanes, hit Elena's car head-on. The officer said. Richard's voice broke. He said my wife died at the scene, but my daughter was alive, conscious, screaming for me. And when you got to the hospital, Lilith was in shock. Physically fine, just bruises and a mild concussion. But she wouldn't speak, just stared at me with these enormous eyes, like she was waiting for me to explain why I hadn't been there, why I'd sent her mother out in the rain, why I'd chosen a business deal over them. Kyle nodded slowly. What did you say to her? Nothing. I mean, I said the right things. I'm sorry. I love you. It's not your fault. But I never said the real thing. I never said it was my fault. That I killed her mother by being too important for a phone call. Did Lilith say what she saw? Richard closed his eyes. Once. A week after the funeral. She came into my office late at night. I was working, always working. She said, Mama called your name before she stopped breathing. She said, tell Daddy I love him. But you weren't there, were you? And I told her it was complicated. That grown-up things were complicated. Then I sent her back to bed. You never let her be angry at you. What? You never let your daughter be angry at you for not being there when her mother died. You buried it under complicated and grown up and moving forward. You made her carry your guilt along with her trauma. Kyle's words were gentle, but they cut like knives. So she's been protecting you for 2 years. Being a good girl. Not causing problems. Pretending she's okay so you don't have to face what you did. Richard wanted to argue, to defend himself. But the heart monitor's beeping had changed. Faster. More irregular. Lilith was reacting to the truth being spoken. She's listening, Kyle said. She hears us. She's always been listening, Mr. Brooks. Waiting for you to be honest. The door burst open. Dr. Patricia Hernandez strode in, her face tight with professional anger. Behind her stood 2 security guards and a woman Richard didn't recognize. Probably hospital administration. Mr. Brooks, this is unacceptable, Dr. Hernandez said. I've been informed that you've allowed an unauthorized minor to access your daughter's room. That you've threatened hospital staff. That you're refusing to follow basic protocols. I'm following the only protocol that matters, Richard said. I'm trying to save my daughter. By letting a homeless child play doctor? This is a medical facility, not a spiritual healing center. Dr. Hernandez turned to Kyle with barely concealed contempt. Young man, I don't know what you think you're doing, but these machines, this monitoring equipment, they're keeping this girl alive. Not feelings. Not confessions. Science. Kyle stood. Despite being half Dr. Hernandez's height, he met her eyes without flinching. Your science says her brain is fine. Her body is fine. Everything is working except she won't wake up. You've had 17 days to fix it with your machines. How's that working out? Dr. Hernandez's face flushed. The audacity. Look at the monitor, Kyle interrupted, pointing at the heart rate display. It's been steady at 62 beats per minute for 17 days. Right now it's 78. Because she's hearing truth for the first time since she's been in this bed. That's not science. That's her soul responding. Dr. Hernandez glanced at the monitor. Her expression shifted slightly, surprise, quickly masked. Elevated heart rate could indicate stress. We should clear the room. No. Richard stood. Dr. Hernandez, I respect your expertise. I'm grateful for everything you've done. But you've admitted you don't know what's wrong with my daughter. This boy does, and I'm going to listen to him. Mr. Brooks, if something goes wrong, if her condition deteriorates, then I'll take full responsibility. Put it in writing. I'll sign whatever you need. But he stays. The administrator stepped forward. Mr. Brooks, we have liability concerns. Then I'll remove my daughter from his hospital. Right now, against medical advice. And I'll take her somewhere that will let me do what's necessary to wake her up. It was a bluff. Mostly. But Richard delivered it with the certainty of a man who negotiated billion-dollar deals. The administrator's face paled. Dr. Hernandez studied Richard for a long moment. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. She turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I hope you're right. I hope this boy can do what we couldn't. Her voice softened slightly. Your daughter deserves a miracle, Mr. Brooks. I'm just not sure this is it. After they left, Kyle turned to Richard. We don't have much time. They'll find a way to stop this. A court order, a psychiatric evaluation, something. We need to do this tonight. Do what? Break the lie that's keeping your daughter asleep. Kyle moved to Lilith's bedside. She's trapped between two truths. The truth that her mother died while you were choosing work over family. And the lie she tells herself. That it doesn't matter, that she's fine, that she can be strong enough for both of you. The lie is comfortable, Mr. Brooks. Safe. She's built a whole world inside it. To wake her up, we have to make the truth more compelling than the lie. Ow! Kyle looked at him with those two old eyes. You have to give her permission to be angry. Permission to hate you. Permission to blame you. And you have to mean it. No defenses. No excuses. Just the raw truth that you failed her and her mother. Richard felt his throat close. I don't know if I can do that. Then your daughter stays asleep forever. Kyle's voice was hard now. Because she's not protecting herself anymore, Mr. Brooks. She's protecting you from facing what you did. And she'll die doing it if you don't release her. The heart monitor beeped steadily. 78 beats per minute. Faster than it had been in 17 days. Lilith was listening, waiting, hoping her father would finally be brave enough to tell the truth. Richard sat down beside his daughter's bed. His hand found hers, small, cold, alive, but absent. Lilith, baby, if you can hear me. His voice cracked. I need to tell you something I should have said 2 years ago. The machines hummed. The heart monitor beeped. And in the space between breaths, Richard Brooks finally began to tell the truth. Dr. Patricia Hernandez didn't sleep that night. She sat in her office on the 4th floor, drinking coffee that had gone cold hours ago, and tried to reconcile what she'd witnessed with 23 years of medical training. The boy was right. Lilith Brooks' heart rate had elevated the moment they started talking about the accident. Not stress. Not deterioration. Response. As if the comatose girl was listening and reacting to emotional content. It was impossible. Except it was happening. At 2:47 a.m., she pulled Lilith's file and reviewed every test, every scan, every consultation note. Normal. Everything was maddeningly, impossibly normal. The EEG showed brain activity consistent with deep sleep, not coma. The MRI revealed no damage, no anomalies. Blood work was perfect. By every measurable metric, Lilith Brooks should have been awake and complaining about hospital food. But she wasn't. Dr. Hernandez had seen unexplained comas before, rare cases where the medical reason remained elusive. But this felt different. The way the girl had collapsed mid-performance, as if someone had flipped a switch. The way she maintained perfect vital signs while remaining completely unresponsive. The way her heart rate spiked when her father finally started talking about the night his wife died. This wasn't medicine. This was something else. Her phone buzzed. A text from Janet Williams, the ICU nurse on duty. You need to see this. Dr. Hernandez took the elevator to the 7th floor. Room 714's door was closed, but through the window, she could see Richard Brooks sitting beside his daughter's bed, talking. The homeless boy, Kyle, sat in the corner, watching with those unsettling eyes. He's been talking for 4 hours, Janet whispered, confessing everything. The phone calls he ignored. The meetings he prioritized. The times he chose work over his daughter. The guilt he's carried. The anger at his wife for dying. The fear that he's a terrible father. Everything. And Lilith. Janet pulled up the monitoring station. Heart rate has been fluctuating between 75 and 90. Blood pressure is elevated. Brain activity is increasing. She's there, Dr. Hernandez. She's listening to every word. Dr. Hernandez watched Richard Brooks break down crying, his forehead pressed against his daughter's hand. The boy sat motionless, a small figure in an oversized jacket, bearing witness to this dismantling of a powerful man's carefully constructed walls. This violates every protocol we have, Dr. Hernandez said quietly. I know. If the board finds out, they already know. Administration sent me 3 emails demanding I remove the boy and sedate Mr. Brooks if necessary. Janet's expression was conflicted. But Dr. Hernandez, I've been a nurse for 19 years. I've seen a lot of things that don't make sense medically, but happen anyway. Prayer circles that precede miraculous recoveries. Family members who arrive minutes before a patient dies, as if summoned by something we can't measure. This boy, whatever he's doing, it's working. We don't know that yet, don't we? At 6:15 a.m., Dr. Hernandez's phone rang. The hospital's chief of medicine, Dr. Raymond Foster. Patricia, what the hell is happening on your floor? Dr. Foster, I can explain. The board is in emergency session. We have a homeless minor in a patient's room, unauthorized and uncredentialed. We have the patient's father refusing to follow medical advice. And we have you apparently allowing all of this to continue. Sir, the patient is showing improvement. Improvement? She's still in a coma. Patricia, she hasn't opened her eyes. She hasn't spoken. Whatever you think you're seeing, it's not improvement. It's hope disguised as medicine. With respect, sir, we've exhausted every medical option. What's happening now may be unconventional, but it's liability. Pure and simple. If something goes wrong, if that girl's condition deteriorates, this hospital will be sued into oblivion. And you'll be the one explaining to a jury why you let a street kid play doctor with a billionaire's daughter. Dr. Hernandez closed her eyes. What do you want me to do? I want you to remove the boy. Immediately. I want Mr. Brooks escorted from the premises for violating hospital policy. And I want that girl transferred to psychiatric evaluation to determine if there's an underlying psychological component we've missed. And if I refuse, a long pause. Then I'll have security do it. And I'll ask for your resignation, effective immediately. The line went dead. Dr. Hernandez stood in the hallway outside room 714, watching Richard Brooks hold his daughter's hand and whisper truths that had been buried for 2 years. She thought about the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. But what was harm in this situation? Allowing unconventional healing that might work? Or enforcing protocols that had already failed? She made her decision. At 7 a.m., she entered room 714. Richard looked up, his face ravaged by tears and exhaustion. Kyle remained in the corner, alert despite the sleepless night. Mr. Brooks, I need to inform you that the hospital board has issued a directive. The boy must leave. You must leave, and your daughter will be transferred to psychiatric evaluation. Richard stood. No, it's not optional. Security is on their way. Dr. Hernandez. Kyle's voice cut through the tension. Look at the EEG. They all turned to the monitor. The brainwave pattern had changed. The regular, deep sleep waves were punctuated by spikes of activity. Brief moments of higher consciousness, flickering like a candle fighting wind. She's close, Kyle said. So close. If you stop this now, she'll retreat deeper. She'll decide the truth is too dangerous. And you'll never get her back. Dr. Hernandez looked at the data. 23 years of training told her this was dangerous, unprofessional, potentially catastrophic. But something deeper, some instinct that existed before medical school and evidence-based protocols, told her the boy was right. How long, she asked. How long until you think she'll wake? I don't know. Hours. Maybe minutes. But we're not done yet. He hasn't given her the last thing she needs. Which is... Kyle looked at Richard. Permission. Not just to be angry. Permission to forgive him. Or not forgive him. Whatever she chooses. She needs to know that her choice won't destroy him. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Multiple sets. Heavy. Security was here. Dr. Hernandez moved to the door and locked it from inside. It wouldn't hold long. Security had master keys, but it would buy minutes. Dr. Hernandez, what are you doing? Richard asked. Probably ending my career, she said. But I'm giving you 10 more minutes. Whatever you need to say to your daughter, say it now. Because when that door opens, this ends. Kyle nodded. That's enough time. Mr. Brooks, there's one more thing. Something your daughter loved that you stopped doing after your wife died. What was it? Richard's brow furrowed. There were lots of things. Richard Brooks made his choice at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night, 17 days after his daughter stopped speaking. He chose Kyle. Dr. Hernandez had left him with an ultimatum: submit to psychiatric evaluation or lose visitation rights. The hospital's legal team was drafting papers. The board of directors had held an emergency meeting about the homeless child incident. Security had been doubled on the 7th floor. Everyone was protecting Lilith from the dangerous combination of her desperate father and a street kid with delusions. But Richard saw something they didn't. When Kyle sat beside Lilith's bed and spoke about emotional truth and hidden grief, the monitors had changed. Subtle shifts in heart rate. Slight variations in brain wave patterns. Nothing the doctors considered significant, but Richard had built his empire on recognizing patterns others missed. His daughter was listening. At midnight, when the hospital settled into its graveyard shift quiet, Kyle returned. He shouldn't have been able to enter the building. His photo had been circulated to every security station. But there he stood in the doorway of room 714, barefoot and certain. You came back, Richard said. I told you I could wake her. I don't break promises. Kyle entered the room and looked at Lilith with an expression that made Richard's chest ache. Compassion. Pure. Uncomplicated compassion. When was the last time Richard had looked at his daughter that way, instead of seeing his own failure reflected in her stillness? What do we do? Richard asked. We create space for truth. Real truth. Not the sanitized version you tell at board meetings or therapy sessions. The raw, ugly truth you've been swallowing for 2 years. Kyle began dimming the harsh fluorescent lights, using the room's control panel with surprising familiarity. Your daughter is drowning in your silence, Mr. Brooks. She's been waiting for you to admit what you both know, but never say. I don't understand. Yes, you do. Kyle pulled the visitor's chair close to Lilith's bed. Sit here. Hold her hand. And tell her what you've been hiding. Richard sat. His daughter's hand was cool and small in his. What'd she gotten so thin? The feeding tube kept her nourished, but she was fading anyway, becoming translucent, as if preparing to disappear entirely. I don't know where to start, Richard admitted. Start with the phone call. The third call. The one you finally answered while your wife was bleeding. The room contracted. How did this child know? Richard had never told anyone about that final call. Not the police. Not the therapists. Not even himself, in the dark hours when memory insisted on replaying that night. She called while I was still in the meeting. Richard heard himself say. His voice sounded distant, as if someone else was speaking. I was annoyed. The deal was collapsing. Millions of dollars were at stake. So when she called the third time, I answered and I said. His throat closed. The words that had haunted him for 2 years stuck like glass. Say it, Kyle urged gently. She needs to hear it. I said, Elena, I'm busy. Can this wait? Richard's eyes burned. Those were my last words to my wife. Can this wait? And she said, Richard, I think something's wrong with the car. The brakes feel strange. And I said, God help me. I said, just drive carefully. I'll look at it tomorrow. The heart monitor's beeping accelerated. Lilith's fingers twitched in his hand. Keep going, Kyle said. 20 minutes later, the police called. Her brakes had failed on the wet road. She'd crashed into a barrier on the highway. Lilith was in the back seat, screaming, covered in her mother's blood. And I was still in that conference room, still trying to save a deal that didn't matter. Still being too busy for the people who actually mattered. Richard looked at his daughter's face, searching for any sign she could hear him. Lilith, I killed your mother. Not with my hands, but with my choices. I chose work over her. I chose money over safety. I chose being important over being present. And when you looked at me at her funeral, I saw it in your eyes. You knew. You've always known. The machines around them began to alarm softly. Lilith's heart rate was climbing. Her eyelids fluttered. "Don't stop now," Kyle said urgently. "Tell her the rest. The part you've never admitted even to yourself." "I blamed her," Richard choked out. "I blamed Elena for not being more insistent. For not demanding I come home. For not making me understand it was an emergency. I blamed her so I wouldn't have to blame myself. And then I blamed Lilith for surviving when her mother didn't. For being here, reminding me every day of what I lost, of what I destroyed." The words tore out of him like shrapnel. "I couldn't look at you, baby. Every time I saw your face, I saw her face. Every time you smiled, I remembered her smile. So I buried myself in work. I ran. I've been running for 2 years, and I left you to carry all that grief and guilt alone. You were 6 years old, and I made you be the strong one." Tears streamed down Richard's face, the first he'd cried since Elena's funeral. "I'm so sorry, Lilith. I'm so desperately sorry. You shouldn't have had to be strong. You should have had a father who held you while you cried, who told you it wasn't your fault, who promised the nightmares would fade. Instead, you got a ghost. A man who looked like your father, but was really just a machine pretending to be human." Kyle stood and moved to the other side of the bed. "Now the ritual. The thing your wife used to do with Lilith. The thing you've refused to remember because it hurt too much." Richard's breath caught. "How do you know about that?" "Your daughter remembers. Her body remembers. Show her that you remember too." And suddenly Richard knew what Kyle meant. The hand-clapping game. Elena had invented it when Lilith was 4, a complicated rhythm of claps and hand touches that accompanied a song. Lilith had loved it. They played it every night before bed, the 3 of them, laughing when someone missed the rhythm. Richard hadn't played it since Elena died. Couldn't. The memory was too painful. "I can't," he whispered. "You can. You have to. This is what she's waiting for. Permission to remember the joy without drowning in the loss." Richard lifted his daughter's hand. His own hand shook as he began the pattern. Clap, touch palm, clap, clap, touch fingers. The rhythm was buried in his muscle memory, waiting to be rediscovered. And then he sang, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." His voice cracked, broken and raw. He sounded nothing like he had when Elena was alive, when singing had been easy and joy had been possible. "You make me happy when skies are gray." Kyle joined in, his young voice clear and true, weaving harmony around Richard's broken melody. "You'll never know, dear, how much I love you," the machine screamed. Lilith's eyes flew open. "Please don't take my sunshine away." Lilith's fingers squeezed his hand. Her lips moved, forming words that came out as barely a whisper. "Daddy, stopped hiding." Richard collapsed forward, his head on her bed, his body shaking with sobs that had been locked inside for 2 years. Lilith's small hand touched his hair, the first intentional movement she'd made in 17 days. "I'm here, baby," Richard gasped. "I'm finally here." Kyle stepped back, his work complete. In the doorway, nurses were rushing in, responding to the alarms. Dr. Hernandez appeared, her face shocked as she saw Lilith's open eyes. "That's impossible," the doctor breathed. "That's medically impossible." But Kyle was already leaving. He slipped past the rushing medical staff like smoke, there and then gone. Richard wanted to thank him, to ask him how he knew, to understand what had just happened. But when he looked up, Kyle had vanished. In the bed, Lilith smiled weakly and whispered, "The boy said you just needed to remember how to be real." Lilith Brooks was discharged from Cedars-Sinai Medical Center 48 hours after waking, baffling every specialist who examined her. Dr. Hernandez ran comprehensive tests, neurological, psychological, physical. Everything came back normal. Better than normal. It was as if the 17-day coma had never happened. "I don't understand it," Dr. Hernandez admitted to Richard on discharge day. "There should be muscle atrophy, cognitive delays, some residual effect. But your daughter is fine. Completely fine. It defies every medical precedent." Richard didn't care about medical precedents. His daughter was awake, laughing, asking for pancakes. She remembered everything from before the coma, but described the coma itself as being in a waiting room where everything was gray and quiet. "I could hear you sometimes," she told him on their first morning together. "When you talked about work stuff, your voice was far away. But when that boy came and you started telling the truth, you got louder. Clearer. Like you were coming back from somewhere far away too. Kyle, Richard said. The boy's name was Kyle Porter. He's nice. He said Grandma sent him. Richard's blood went cold. What? He said Grandma Elena told him I was waiting. That she couldn't come get me herself because she's busy being a star now, but she sent him instead. Richard tried to rationalize this. Lilith had been unconscious. Perhaps she'd dreamed Kyle's presence, incorporated him into whatever mental space she'd inhabited. But that didn't explain how Kyle had known about Elena's death, about the phone calls, about the hand-clapping game. On their second day home, Richard decided to find answers. He needed to thank Kyle properly, to understand what had happened, perhaps to hire him some kind of mentor or guide who could help him develop his unusual gifts. He called the hospital first. I need to see the security footage from room 714 for the past 3 weeks. The head of security, a man named David Morrison, called him back personally. Mr. Brooks, we've actually been meaning to discuss this with you. There's an irregularity. What kind of irregularity? The boy, Kyle Porter. He doesn't appear on any footage. Richard laughed. That's impossible. He was there for hours. Multiple nurses saw him. Dr. Hernandez saw him. I saw him. We know, sir. We have witness statements from 7 staff members confirming his presence. But the cameras show something different. Morrison's voice was carefully professional, but Richard detected unease beneath it. Would you like to come review the footage yourself? Richard arrived at Cedars-Sinai that afternoon. Morrison led him to the security office and pulled up the relevant files. They watched the footage from a night Kyle first appeared. On screen, Richard sat alone in room 714. The timestamp showed 7:47 p.m., exactly when Kyle had walked in. On the footage, Richard suddenly stood, as if addressing someone. His mouth moved in conversation, but the room appeared empty. No Kaid. No barefoot boy in an oversized jacket. This has to be a technical glitch, Richard said. That's what we thought. But watch this. Morrison fast-forwarded to the final night, when Kyle had orchestrated the ritual that woke Lilith. On screen, Richard sat holding Lilith's hand, talking to empty air. His hands moved through the clapping pattern, but he appeared to be clapping alone. His mouth opened in song. And then Lilith woke, reached toward nothing, and smiled. Every camera on the 7th floor tells the same story, Morrison said quietly. Kyle Porter was never here. At least, not in any way our technology can capture. Richard's hands gripped the desk. 7 people saw him. Are you suggesting we all hallucinated the same child? I'm not suggesting anything, Mr. Brooks. I'm simply showing you what the cameras recorded. Morrison pulled out a file folder. We did some additional research. Kyle Porter does exist. He's 11 years old, lives in Hunts Point in the Bronx. His mother works at a laundromat. His grandmother, Esther Porter, was known in the neighborhood as a healer, traditional medicine, herbal remedies, that sort of thing. Was known. She died 3 months ago. Heart failure. Morrison opened the folder, revealing newspaper clippings. But here's where it gets strange. Esther Porter had a grandson named Kyle who died 4 years ago. Age 7. Pneumonia. The Kyle Porter currently living in Hunts Point is her granddaughter Kendra's son, but he goes by a different name. Marcus. The room spun. That's impossible. I spoke with Kyle. He was real. He was solid. I believe you, Mr. Brooks. But our cameras suggest otherwise. And when our staff followed up with the address listed for Kyle Porter, they found a different family living there. No one matching his description. No record of anyone by that name attending any school in the Bronx. Richard left the hospital with more questions than answers. He hired a private investigator, the best in New York, and gave him one task: find Kyle Porter. The investigator returned 3 days later with a thin file. Mr. Brooks, I've traced every Kyle Porter in the 5 boroughs. None of them match your description. The one who died 4 years ago came closest. Age would be right, grandmother named Esther. But he's deceased. Death certificate, burial plot, the whole record. What about the homeless camps in Hunts Point? The shelters? I checked them all. Showed his description to over 50 people. A few said they'd heard stories about a boy who knew things, but no one had actually seen him. It's like he's a legend, not a person. Richard couldn't accept this. He drove to Hunts Point himself, his Tesla looking absurdly out of place among the aged buildings and struggling businesses. He walked the streets, asking anyone who would talk to him about Kyle Porter, about Esther Porter, about mysterious healing boys. At a corner bodega, the owner, Mr. Rodriguez, studied him with suspicious eyes. Why is a rich man looking for street kids? He saved my daughter's life. I need to thank him. Something in Richard's sincerity must have reached Mr. Rodriguez. His expression softened. You talking about Mama, Esther's boy? The one with the knowing? Yes. He found Esther Porter's grave easily. Simple headstone, fresh flowers despite the approaching winter. And next to it a smaller stone. Kyle Porter, age 7, forever loved. Richard knelt in the grass. I don't understand this, he said to the silence. But thank you. Thank you for sending whoever or whatever that was. Thank you for giving me my daughter back. Thank you for teaching me how to be human again. The wind picked up, rustling through the cemetery trees. For just a moment, Richard thought he heard a child's laughter, bright and free. He drove home in tears. Not sad tears this time, but something else. Something like wonder. That night, Richard sat with Lilith in her room. Really sat, not distracted by his phone or thinking about work. They played the hand-clapping game. They sang You Are My Sunshine. They talked about Elena, about memories both painful and beautiful, about grief that was finally becoming something they could carry together instead of alone. Daddy, Lilith asked as he tucked her in, are you going to keep being real? Or are you going to go back to being a ghost? The question pierced him. I'm going to keep being real, baby. I promise. Good. Because being real is better. Even when it hurts. In the weeks that followed, Richard Brooks began dismantling his empire. Not destroying it, restructuring it. He sold the divisions that prioritized profit over people. He resigned from boards that promoted exploitation. He liquidated assets worth hundreds of millions of dollars. His CFO thought he'd lost his mind. His board of directors threatened to remove him. The business press wrote articles about his breakdown. Richard didn't care. He'd spent 2 years building walls around his heart, and those walls had nearly killed his daughter. He was done with walls. He used the liquidated funds to establish the Invisible Voices Foundation. Its mission, to honor traditional healing practices that modern medicine overlooked, to provide resources for homeless youth, to create spaces where emotional truth was valued as much as technological innovation. The foundation's first center opened in the Bronx, in a building 3 blocks from where Esther Porter used to sit in her folding chair. They offered free counseling, art therapy, music programs, and a revolutionary approach to healing that combined medical science with emotional and spiritual wisdom. Richard insisted on one condition: a memorial wall listing every person who'd contributed to healing in marginalized communities. Esther Porter's name was first. Below it, in smaller letters, and Kyle Porter, who taught a grieving father how to see. On the center's opening day, as Richard stood before a crowd of community members, activists, and former colleagues, he told the truth. 2 years ago, I lost my wife. I thought I was grieving, but really I was hiding. I buried myself in work and money and power because those things were easier than feeling. And my daughter paid the price. She nearly died because I forgot how to be human. He paused, looking at Lilith standing in the front row, healthy and whole. A boy, maybe real, maybe something else, came to me when I needed him most. He taught me that healing isn't about technology or money. It's about truth, about vulnerability, about seeing the people we love and letting them see us. This foundation exists because of that lesson. We're going to create spaces where people can be seen, where pain doesn't have to be hidden, where the wisdom that lives in places like this, he gestured to the Bronx streets around them, is honored instead of ignored. The crowd applauded, but Richard was looking at an empty space near the back, where for just a moment, he could have sworn he saw a small boy in an oversized jacket, smiling. Later that night, after the celebration ended, Richard returned to the cemetery. He placed flowers on both graves, Esther's and Kyle's. I don't know if you were a ghost, or an angel, or my daughter's unconscious mind, or just a deeply compassionate kid who somehow knew what we needed, Richard said quietly. But you gave me back my life. You gave me back my daughter. And I'm going to spend the rest of my days honoring that gift by doing what you did, helping people remember how to be real. The wind whispered through the trees. Somewhere in the city, a child laughed. And Richard Brooks, former ghost, current human, walked home to his daughter and the beautiful, terrifying work of staying present for whatever came next. The cameras never captured Kyle Porter. But dozens of people over the following years would report seeing a boy matching his description at the Invisible Voices centers, sitting with grieving parents, talking quietly with traumatized children, appearing wherever emotional truth needed to be spoken. The staff started calling him the boy who walks between. Nobody knew where he came from. Nobody knew where he went. But everyone who met him left changed, carrying a little more courage to be real. And perhaps that was the only miracle that ever really mattered.